Hi, I'm Bill Brochtrup, Artistic Director of Antaeus Theater Company, and welcome to the Antaeus Book Club. In this chapter, I had the honor of talking about Caryl Churchill's Top Girls with Cameron Watson, who directed our spring 2014 production, and our special guest star, Rebecca Mozo, who played the lead character, Marlene. It's a great conversation about a wonderful play, and I hope you enjoy it.
Before we jump into the Q&A with Bill and our guests, we'll just go through the slideshow to look at a little bit of background about the play and the production. So Caryl Churchill was born in 1938 in London. As a playwright, she's known for dramatizing the abuses of power, for her use of non-naturalistic techniques, and for her exploration of sexual politics and feminist themes. Celebrated for works such as Cloud Nine, Top Girls, Far Away, and Love and Information, she's been described as one of Britain's greatest poets and innovators for the contemporary stage. Many 21st century polls have consistently listed Churchill as one of the greatest living playwrights. She served as resident dramatist at the Royal Court Theatre from 1974 to 75 and was their first female playwright in residence. Her first play to receive wide notice was Cloud Nine in 1979, a farce about sexual politics set partly in British overseas colony during the Victorian era. She won an Obie Award for Best Play in 1983 with Top Girls. She's currently 82 years old and is still living in London, writing plays and poetry. So, Top Girls was written in 1982 and centers around Marlene, who's just been made managing director of the Top Girls Employment Agency. She quickly discovers that a life above the glass ceiling is not all it's cracked up to be. An insightful commentary on bourgeois feminism, this bold and ingenious work offers one of the theater's most honest portraits of what it means to be a woman in the modern world. Shoulder pads may no longer be in fashion, but Churchill's masterpiece continues to resonate. Top Girls was written in the background of Margaret Thatcher's election as Britain's first female prime minister and deals with concerns such as Thatcher's right wing politics, a shift in 1980s Britain from a socialist mindset to a more capitalist one, and the feminine politics of the 1980s. The play has an all female cast playing complex characters, which has been hailed by critics as the most significant feminist intervention in the patriarchal drama mode. In this play, Churchill also developed a stylistic technique of overlapping dialogue and non-linear storyline. Cameron Watson. Cameron was recently heralded by the Los Angeles Times as one of our finest contemporary directors. His extensive and varied body of work garnered him the 2018 Distinguished Achievement in Directing Award from the Los Angeles Drama Critics Circle. A multiple award winning theater director and filmmaker, Cameron has carved a unique career that crosses over many genres and formats. A prolific and much sought after theater director, Cameron has achieved widespread critical praise, with the Wall Street Journal citing his work as the best in the country. He is known for his much lauded box office hits at Antaeus Theater Company, including The Little Foxes, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Picnic, and Top Girls, and work at the Fountain Theater and Pasadena Playhouse. Born in Kentucky and raised in Tennessee, Cameron currently lives in the Hollywood Hills of Los Angeles. Rebecca Mozo is a Brazilian American actress who has been involved in several world premieres of plays by playwrights such as Rachel Bonds, Lauren Gunderson, Becca Brunstetter, Sarah Treem, Bo Williman, and more. She's performed in regional theaters such as Pasadena Playhouse, South Coast Repertory, the Shakespeare Theater of New Jersey, and the Mark Taper Forum. Theater credits at Antaeus include Elena in Uncle Vanya, Vivi Warren in Mrs. Warren's Profession, Leah Vivian in Peace in Our Time, Cordelia in King Lear, Marlene in Top Girls, Hortense in Cousin Bet, and Melek slash Kiraz in Parapalas. She earned her BFA from Rutgers University and studied at the Globe Theatre in London. And so with that, I will hand it over to Bill for the Q&A. Take it away, Bill.
Oh, thank you so much, Alice. We are thrilled to have one of our favorite directors at NTS, Cameron Watson, to talk about Top Girls, which was the first production he directed with us. And we were like, you know who we would love to have join us is a special guest star, Rebecca Mozo, from New Jersey, where she's currently living. And, you know, I was kind of joking with her before we started this, but truly, she's one of the most talented actors at NTS. I mean, I think everybody will admit that that is true. She is superb, and was superb in this production where she played Marlene, the lead character. Um, you know, I don't know how many people had a chance to read Top Girls or to see it, but it's a little bit of a confusing play because the structure is a little unusual. So I thought it would be good if we kind of talked through it a little bit, that structure, before anything else. I'll say that this play came to us in a very, Antaeus-y kind of way. I think that company members Joanna Strapp and Ann Noble had been looking for pieces that had a lot of parts for women, which is always something we're looking for and sometimes can be difficult to find. They kind of did some sessions on this just in the library working on it, and we all fell in love with this play and with Caryl Churchill's work. And I think it was also a bit of a, I think at the time, people are a little bit like, oh my gosh, Caryl Churchill, she's a living playwright. Most of our playwrights are long deceased. But we felt very strongly that Carol's work qualified as a contemporary classic. I have always felt that she had a great look into the future. She's like a prophet. She has everything she has seen has come to pass. And you look at Cloud Nine and you look at this play and other works of hers in more recent times, she has got a real vision about what's happening, which made it seem like this is a classic piece. So with that, Cameron, welcome. Unmute your little self. And I thought we would just talk, the play is written in sort of a couple of sections. And the first section is one that people are familiar with. You'll see a lot of the logos kind of look, like this, and have pictures of, women in costume garb, because the first scene takes place at a dinner party at a restaurant in London in 1982, filled with women from history. And it's a kind of a random thing. Women who were not from the same period in history, but women in history. So yes, tell us about that.
Well, it is. And I always say, people, and myself included, people say, when you bring up Top Girls, people go, oh, that's that play with that crazy opening act where it's all these historical women having a contemporary dinner at a restaurant at a table and they're all talking over each other. That's that weird play about that. And I think that's everybody's idea of what the play is, because the imagery of that is so kind of iconic and popular, and that part of the play is a confusing part of the play to read on paper. It's just hard to read. It's hard to decipher it. But then it goes from that whole 40, it's about 40 minutes, act one section. And then it shifts immediately into the office workspace in the 80s, where Marlene is working. And we have all of these kind of rapid fire vignettes of all the women working in this office environment. And it's tracking, Marlene primarily, but then we have people interviewing for jobs, people who also work there. And it kind of jars you. You watch the first part of it and you go, oh, this play's going to be like this. And then all of a sudden act two is a completely different world. And then act three is a completely different world after that. Just when you think you know what's going on, it all switches, and we're in a small flat, a small house in northern England, and we're witnessing kind of a family kitchen sink drama. So the structure of it is really unconventional and confusing on paper, but off of paper, when it's fully realized, it makes a lot of sense, and you see the genius of why she did it that way.
Well, let's bring Rebecca Mozo into the conversation. We are so pleased to have you again. So in this first scene, all the women are playing historical figures, and maybe we should kind of go through those, except for you, who are playing Marlene. And who is Marlene?
Marlene, she is the lead of the play in that I think it's all kind of through her lens, and she is the newly appointed managing director at the Top Girls Employment Agency. So it's a big accomplishment. It's a celebratory dinner, which is why, you know, that scene is happening. It's to celebrate the promotion that Marlene has gotten. And that's what I think so interesting too about these historical characters, is that it's not like, you know, Queen Elizabeth and these like characters that you would immediately recognize and know. They're historical women, but they're kind of like sideline historical women, you know, like what they all have in common is that they've achieved extraordinary things, but you don't necessarily know who they are.
Let's kind of go
That
through
makes
them
sense.
just for those who don't.
Speaking of not knowing who they are, who are they?
There's Isabella Bird, who is lived from 1831 to 1904, who was a traveler. She traveled between the ages of 40 and 70 in her life. So she is, yes, a traveler, but not well, and a writer, but not perhaps well known to everyone in the way that like a Queen Elizabeth or Cleopatra or something.
Right.
Lady Nijo. Yes, I read a little about her. She's born in 1258, was a Japanese emperor's courtesan and later a Buddhist nun who traveled on foot throughout Japan. Dulgret is the subject of a Bruegel painting. She's a woman in an apron and armor who leads a crowd of women charging through hell, fighting devils. Pope Joan, who is a real person, is thought to have been the Pope between 854 and 856 when she was disguised as a man. And Patient Griselda is the obedient wife whose story is told by Chaucer in the Clark's Tale of the Canterbury Tales. So those are the women who oddly joined together for this dinner party to celebrate Marlene moving up into middle management. So it's a pretty funny situation.
And am I muted? No, it is, you know, you're sitting, you're looking at the stage, and the stage is set for a table of 8, and it's 1982, I think we placed it in, what she wrote it in. That's when the original production was, but and then we see Marlene and the waitress, and the waitress is like a waitress that we have today, a woman with a you know, black pants and an apron and a white napkin, and you think, okay, well, here, this is going to be that's the first image you see, is Marlene in an 80s beautiful dress to go out to dinner, and then you see this waitress come in, and then one by one these historically costumed and real figures come into the restaurant, and you can't get your balance. You can't get a grip on like what is happening in front of us. It's a fascinating opening to a play, because you can't sit back and go, oh, okay, this is going to be a dinner party scene. You're like, who is that? Which is fascinating to me, I think.
And the play is written in such a way that, like a real dinner party, where we would be, unlike on Zoom where you can't interrupt very well people, in a dinner party, people are interrupting. And the play is written with overlapping dialogue that kind of goes like this throughout. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, she was one of the first, I think the first person who purposefully did this overlapping dialogue technique, and she started that whole punctuation, which is now very common and a lot of playwrights use it, of a backslash. So if there's a line of dialogue and Marlene is talking, then somewhere in that dialogue is a backslash, and then there's a backslash in the next character's line that is somewhere within the middle of that line, which means that next character's line starts at the backslash of Marlene's line. And she makes it very clear at the top of the play, this is how this works. This is how this punctuation works. And it was maddening in the beginning. We were a little more used to it because a lot of playwrights use that now, but it's so much a part of that first scene. It's a part of the whole play, but it's so much a part of that first scene. And by the time you get all, I guess there are 6 of them total. I guess how many at the table? 6.
Let me count again.
6 at the
3,
table.
6, 3, 5, 6, and a waiter. 7.
Yes,
right?
6 is it.
Yeah.
But you get them all in there, and there's all this overlapping dialogue that becomes like what we used to call an orchestra rehearsal, and we would rehearse it like an orchestra. And you would sometimes I would say, you know what, we need to hear more of the Pope at this overlapping section here. It's like saying, I need more bass here. I need to bring the strings up here and quieten down strings. Let's hear the trumpet here a little more. And it was kind of maddening in the beginning because it was hard. It was just hard to do technically. But then all of a sudden, one day it just started to sing like an orchestra. And we went, oh, you're supposed to hear this over this one maybe a little bit.
Right.
And oh, I've never heard that before, but because it's underlined by this other dialogue, I now hear it more than I would hear it if it weren't. And
Yeah.
right, we it all of a sudden, it took weeks. It took us the first.
No,
several
totally.
weeks.
I remember when we felt like we had finally kind of captured that natural rise and fall. And it was like, holy, that was it. And then we're like, now we have to do it again.
And Cameron said with
that.
food, because there's food and drink in this whole section as well.
That's right.
With food, it's the first act is 40 minutes before, right at 41 minutes. And through the course of that first act, those of you who've read the play or have seen the play, it's a real space and time dinner party. And the dialogue is linked to ordering wine, ordering the first course. It's a 3-course meal with wine being consumed, and the dialogue, salad. It's built in. So after an exchange happens, then Marlene has to go, oh, okay, bring on the salads now. So you have to have it orchestrated. So when you get to that point in the dialogue, the salads have to come on, which led to, we have to eat. I think that the ladies have to eat. And all of you all know this was in the old Antaeus space. And like the new one, it's a beautiful, intimate space, and you can't fake it. You can't act like you're eating a salad, because we're right there. We're sitting right on top of you. So we had to have food rehearsals, and we literally, the women every performance consumed a 3-course meal in the first 40 minutes of the play, and drank. Am I right, Rebecca? I think there were 12 bottles that were served.
Oh,
Isn't
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we would.
Whenever Rhonda and I were on, though, we went through more bottles of wine somehow.
Actor's choice.
It was hilarious. It was always true, though. And I was like, what is with us? I mean, of course, it wasn't really wine, but it was just like, it was a party vibe, that whole dinner scene.
Yeah, it is a party.
And so then this 40 minutes goes on with these women, these odd assortment of women congratulating Marlene on her promotion, which I do find very funny, that they're like, these people who've done some pretty amazing things. Not that middle management isn't
right.
awesome, but
that's why I think the toast is my favorite. The toast is, we've all come a long way to our courage and the way we changed our lives and our extraordinary achievements. She's putting herself up there.
Yeah.
But it is an achievement for Marlene, because, we are talking about a glass ceiling in the world. Yes. And
in a society where class is so prevalent and like important in terms of like how far you can go. And she definitely has come from working class.
Well, that's what takes us to the part so this first scene is, again, iconic because, it's on the posters, and this is the photographs people might have seen of the play or heard about it. The middle section shows all these different kind of job interviews and things happening at that agency. But the most fascinating part is the third section, to me, where Marlene visits her sister, who is still at the hometown, the small town in northern England where they are from. And the two of them took very different paths. Can you maybe talk about that scene, Cameron, and its importance in the play?
Yeah, I keep referring to this. I pulled up my original production book for reference. I keep referring to my book, but I was telling Bill and the team the other day when we were preparing for this little book club. I remember when they first asked me to do this. It was the first play that I'd done there. I'd done some readings, and I'd done some what were they called? What were the
Classics Fest
Classics
readings.
Fest? I'd done a few of
Mhm.
those, and so I was really thrilled that they were asking me to do a main stage show. But they came; it wasn't my idea. They came to me and said, "Would you, we'd like you to do Top Girls." And I remember going, "Oh wow, oh gosh, that's hard. I think I don't know that plays for me." I'm like I said earlier, I'm the one going, "Isn't that crazy play with all those women in the dining room?" And I was a little, I was like, I was a little scared of it, and I said, "Yeah, let me read it. I've never seen it, and I remember studying it, but let me reread it again." And I read it, and I thought, "God, this is hard to read. This is hard to read." And I read it again, and I read it again, and it took me quite a while in this early process to figure out, well, why me, and why would I do this, and what's my way into it. And it was upon the fourth or fifth read of it that I was reading that last scene between the two sisters, and I went, "Oh, okay, it's about it's about these broken hearts. It's about these sisters who haven't been able to have a life together, and they're completely brokenhearted by it." And I went, that's what I know how to do. That's what I can latch onto. And that was my way into it, because that felt like something very real, and it felt like something that wasn't smarter than me, because the first part of it felt smarter than me. I was like, Caryl Churchill knows a lot more than I do, and I don't know that's my way in. But when I got to that kind of reduced simple syrup of like, it's just this family who, because of all of these choices that they've made and not made, aren't able to be a family. And that broke my heart. And I thought, okay, then this is a play about some broken hearts. And I think that is what that last scene is so um I think it's why it's so beautiful, because yes, they do, the sisters have major differences about political beliefs and opinions, and they can't come to terms with that. They can't come to terms with choices of motherhood or not motherhood, of taking care of the child that Marlene has had and given away. And it just felt so real. I think that scene, by the time you've gone through the chaos and the cacophony of that first piece, and then you go to the office, and then you go to the little hut where the two girls are playing together, and you start to kind of get a gravity about it, or a weight about it, and then you finally get to the end of it, and you get into the heart of it, and then that's when you get your heart ripped out. I think that's her. I always used to talk about it like a what do you call a funnel? It starts in this great big space up here, and each scene just kind of comes down like this to we're in until we're in that third act, and it is just a straight funnel to the heart and the pain.
Well, we want to talk about that, and we will come back to, I think, that idea of a funnel and the triangle and pulling everything down, because that was reflected in the design, and I really do want to talk about that. But I want to get your feelings, Rebecca, about doing that final scene, and the idea of these two sisters who love and hate each other, and it's really a metaphor for like a country and a world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, God, I mean, I know a lot of people, if I wish we could do that scene, like, post Trump and stuff, because holy, I think a lot of people would relate to, like, cause that one section, especially when it gets to the politics stuff, when she says like, well, I didn't mean what I said. I didn't mean it, but and she's like, well, I did. And then she said, but we're still friends, right? And she goes, not this time.
Yeah, there's a real interesting us and them within this whole section, which
Yeah.
I think is so, when you talk about now and you look at America, and there is a feeling, there's an us and a them.
Right.
And in this play with Thatcherite, the Thatcher and Reagan just coming into power, and she doesn't dwell on this. It's interesting. Caryl Churchill doesn't, preach and land on it. It's just the fact that these two sisters, is as if one sister was a New York liberal and one was a
right.
A Tennessee MAGA person or something. They're in the same family. And so she doesn't write about that, but it's the same analogy.
Yeah.
Right. And it will, because it's interesting too, I think, because I think when in that scene too, what you're faced with is the two of them trying, like, you know, Marlene especially trying to kind of connect with her as much as possible, even though she has severed that bond she herself has by like her absence and staying away for as long as she has, and kind of denying her her roots, where she came from, and all of that. But there's also like a real sense of Joyce not having any choices. And so what kind of life do you have left when you don't have any choices, you know? And then there's all of the mother as well. When they talk about the mother too, like what choice did she have? And the father being abusive and that kind of, I think like Marlene's ambition was her armor to protect herself from never getting abused and, you know, having to live a life of poverty and all that kind of stuff. But Joyce has had to do all of that, you know?
Well, there's a cost to, you know, leaving your hometown, moving to the big city to, you know, make your way. And that's a brave thing to do. And it turns out here, a costly thing to do as well.
Yeah.
And there's also a cost for Joyce and those who stay home and take care of the family and take care of the home and don't enjoy all those perks
Right.
that you
But-
get as an executive.
Right. But you also do see Joyce kind of like continuing that abuse cycle too. The way she talks to Angie is just like
Angie's the daughter,
abusive
yeah.
as hell. Yeah, who's really Marlene's daughter, but has given, you know, her to Joyce to raise because of
I'm just
circumstances.
going to read that little bit to us, which is Marlene says, them, us and them, Joyce, and you're one of them, Marlene, and you're us, wonderful us, and Angie's us, and mom and dad are us. And Joyce says, yes, that's right, and you're them. I find that very chilling.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you think
It's
of
a
it.
line in the sand. Yeah.
Yeah. Think of it at that time, you know, when she wrote it with Thatcher, but good Lord, think of it now, you know,
Yeah.
all these, what's that, 40 years? How old is the play?
Yeah, 82.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm more than I can count. And
39. All right.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's very interesting to me how she, and this is why I love Caryl Churchill, how she goes from the big and fantastical and winnows it down into, it distills it down, I guess I'd say, into the political and the personal. And I think this is the reason her writing is so appealing to us. Cameron, maybe you could talk about how you take a design like that as a director's point of view, how you take a design and an idea like that and talk about how we came to this design.
Yeah, it was, you know, I said that thing about the funnel, and I kept talking about that early on in the prep of it before we ever got into rehearsal, because the play I'm kind of visual that way early on of like when we're doing little foxes, I kept saying to the designer way before we got into casting or anything, I said, I just kind of see a spiral. I see a circular something. I see a round something. I don't know where that comes from, but I kept seeing this funnel kind of triangular shape. And Stephen Gifford, the great set designer, we've done many things together, and this one was going to be such a challenge because you have to have the dining room. I mean, the restaurant. You have to have the little backyard hut that the kids have made where that wonderful scene takes place. You have to have the office with multiple people in the office, and then you have to cut out of the office and have these interview rooms multiple times, and then you have to have a kitchen and someone where you can make tea and boil water, and there're just a lot of things. And so I knew I didn't want it to be realistic because I don't think she wants it to. I don't think Caryl intends for it to be terribly realistic. And Stephen Gifford came over to my house and we sat at the dining room table, and he always brings a pad, obviously a sketch pad, but he had brought some whiteboard. And I said, I don't know, Stephen, I don't know. I just see triangles. I see this shape. And he started cutting them out with a little X-Acto knife. And he said, well, what do you think they do? And I said, I think they move. I think they become other spaces. And we put them down on the table, and I'd go, I don't know, if there's 3 of them, maybe one of them stands up and it makes a wall. And then maybe Maybe it falls once on its side and it becomes it's on a turntable. And he was like, well, we can't afford a turntable, so forget that. So we had to strike that one. But we just moved these shapes around, and he just grabbed onto that concept so beautifully and came back with this design that we ended up using, that were these pieces, these giant pieces that were all kind of triangular shaped or angular shaped, which felt very 80s to me. Very, artwork was like that, and everything was kind of angular in that way. And we came up with a way that we could move those pieces. Some of them were free floating; they were on casters, and they could be moved and turned around. Others were wall pieces that had to be physically pushed. And we found a way to make all of these different settings with these very abstract pieces. And I think we have, did we put in the early
Yeah, we've got
renderings?
some little renderings of them.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting.
this is really cool to look. This is the early white model that he had done. Yeah, and it's exactly what we used. In the restaurant, you see the two wall pieces are meet at a point, and then you've got those two entrances. And the table, if you remember, went right in the center there between the two women, kind of on an angle. And he visually, this is just a white model, so you can't see the colors or the textures or fabrics or anything, but we ended up going with very neon 80s colors, and there was light strips in all of the walls. They glowed blue and pink and all different colors. So we were able to have this, like, that looks like a 1980s restaurant in London somewhere. That looks very much like that. And then just by simply look at the top girl's office, by simply just getting rid of the table and the chairs, moving those two pieces further downstage and closing them in together, all of a sudden there's this cubicle for an office cubicle space. And then actually go to the next slide, because I think, aren't there two of these white models? Yeah. And then look, you push those two, look at the large office one, you push those two panels away, and you've got this larger office with these two wonderful kind of gaping, scary entrances that people can come in from anywhere. And then now go back one, if you would. And then you pull all those two floating pieces away, and you take those. No, I'm sorry, you don't pull them away. We turn them around completely, just literally turn them around, and they had different finishes on the back of them. And we created this little triangular fort. And in the script, she calls it a backyard fort that these children have made, which is probably in real life made out of cardboard boxes and blankets and lawn chairs. But we were able just to spin those two things around, and with the lighting, Jared Sayeg's beautiful lighting, we were able to make this little tiny contained fort space. And then we'll go to the next slide again, please. And then for the final scene, and I think we have some good footage of this to show too, we actually, from this point, from this model, you are seeing something that was a preliminary thing. Those two big panel pieces were gone when we made the kitchen. We got them off stage completely. And those two walls, look on the left at the large office, those two walls that made the big office wall, they closed in on each other and came down to almost to the lip of the stage, leaving only about a 4.5 foot space between the stage, the actors, and the front row of the audience. And what was, to me, what was magical about it all, because you look at that, and if you saw the production, it was a massive set for that space. It was a really large mechanical set, but there were no mechanics. The women did all of it. They moved every piece of furniture that was all on wheels. It was seamless, but they moved all of those panels. And at that final transition into the kitchen, they shoved those walls into our face. And the women, it was important to me to see, and we could see that in the scene changes. It was important to me to see these women making the world change, literally making the world change in front of our eyes.
And the effect was it all came crashing towards us and left us with this very small, suffocating kitchen, which is, you know, the way many of us probably feel about our little hometowns. There's a stultifying feeling in it. That was for me. I don't know, Rebecca, was that for you the same?
Oh yeah, I mean, and especially doing that scene with Carrie Ann, I mean, that was just to be in that little tight space with her too. And, you know, all I wanted was like to try and connect with her. And it was just like impossible to do in that tiny little, you know what I mean? Like all we had to do was connect, but there's just like too much that had happened between us, you know?
Carrie Ann
Such a
Flatten,
beautiful
who played Joyce, and was a wonderful performance.
She's incredible.
Incredible. And it tied into that whole thing of that funnel back to that triangular image of it all kind of coming down like that. I wanted, because of my experience with reading it and what I said earlier about it felt big and kind of unwieldy, and then it got a little more okay, and then by the end it was just gripping my heart because it was so taut, and I wanted the audience to feel that visually in that space, and that's why we did push it forward so that by the end you really couldn't take a breath. You almost felt like, I think they're too close to us. I wish they pushed that back a little bit. I think they made a mistake. Are they supposed to be that close to us? And I love that. I love pushing that boundary.
Well, Cameron, you do push the boundaries. I'm gonna one of my very favorite moments of the play, I just want to share with everyone in case you remember it. It shows how a great director takes a piece of text and turns it into a piece of life and something that we watch. Because when you read this, you just don't even notice this little bit. But in that last scene, Marlene goes off to check on Angie, who's getting ready for bed, and all the script, all it says is Marlene goes, Joyce sits, Marlene comes back. And that's all it says in this dialogue. So if I'm reading this, as a reader, I'm often kind of skip right through that. But Cameron, what did you do with that moment?
Well, in the process, it felt like she had to go do what she had to do. She had to go in real time, do what she goes to do, and she goes to talk to Angie. She goes to talk to the daughter, and I thought, well, if we've gone through this, if we've been this far on this journey, and we've gone in real time with this, I think she has to go back there, because the Angie was in her bedroom, which was off stage. You could hear her back there, and eventually she comes into the scene and we see her. But for the majority of that whole scene, she's off stage, and I had her set up back there where you could hear her doing things, and her presence was there. But I was like, well, we improv'd, right? Rebecca was like, well, if you went back there and went to see this daughter or this child who we now know as your daughter, what would happen in that room? And we based it on these improvs, and the Rebecca and Abby or would go back, and Carrie Ann would stay on stage in rehearsal and sit at that kitchen table, and they went back there and had an improv, and they were laughing and they were giggling and they were having fun. And I watched Carrie Ann as the character.
But as an audience, we don't see any of that. All we
don't
see
see any of it.
Sitting on stage
We don't
alone.
see any of it. And you just see the mother, or the woman who's taking care of this child, sitting there seething and heartbroken and angry, and listening to this fun that's being had back in the bedroom. And then after we established the improv, I said, I think we've got to sit in this. I think we've got to sit in this for a while. And we started rehearsing it in real time, and we do it, and it would last for about 30-40 seconds. I'm like, nope, I think it's more. I think it's longer. I think it's longer. Let's push it as far as we can go. And if the audience gets a little restless with it, then I'm okay. I think Caryl would approve of that. And I think we ended up sitting there over 2 minutes. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was at least, I think it was about two minutes and 15 seconds. And interestingly enough, no one ever moved in the audience. It was still. And Carrie Ann, the genius Carrie Ann, just sat there. She didn't have an activity. She's just sitting at that table, and her eyes are just locked on a certain spot. And she sat there for those 2 minutes and 15 seconds. And it's like a play
Riveting.
itself. Riveting.
And that's your brilliance, because it is literally this much of the script to this moment. And I just really appreciate that as a director. You guys, I want to talk, we could talk about Churchill all night, and we're going to go back to it, but I want to take a moment to celebrate the actor and director relationship that the two of you have had. You have done 11, how many? 11 plays
right?
together. So can you guys talk about how this has come about and what's up with that?
It's crazy. You go, Mozo, you go.
Oh gosh, I know. 11. Wow.
11.
How did you guys? What was the first one?
I Capture the Castle.
And I'll tell my quick little version of this, but it's good. It was only the second play I'd ever directed, because I came to directing later in my career. I was an actor for the bulk of my.
A wonderful actor, by the way. Yes.
Thank you. And I was directing a play called I Capture the Castle here in LA at the El Portal. And I was just a work for hire. This woman had called and said, I've got this rights to this play, and it's based on the old Dodie Smith book. Dodie Smith, who wrote 101 Dalmatians, and iconic, beautiful, wonderful English writer. And the play took place in the 30s, and it takes place in a dilapidated castle. And it's a famous book, and to this day, a lot of young English girls have it by their bedside. It's kind of their one of their little Bible books, and it's all told through the eyes of a young girl and her observing her family and her future. And casting that role was so hard. We cast everybody else. We had the father, we had the character actors, we had everybody else. We could not find the actress to carry this play, and she has to literally carry it on her shoulders. And a wonderful casting director who had just started out in the business named Lisa Soltow, who had just started out as a casting director, who is now the head of casting for Amazon Studios. So she has done very well. But it was her first play in LA. And she said, I know we'd seen everybody. I was like, nobody's right. And she said, well, there's this girl who's new in town. She's doing a play. She just did a play at the Taper, did the Cherry Orchard. She's out of Rutgers. The play at the Taper was not incredibly well received, but she kind of came out of it as the shining star. And I was like, well, would she come in? You think she'd come in? And she came in. And Rebecca Mozo walked in the door down South La Cienega. And the minute I saw her, I went, oh, I hope she's good. I love her already. And she started the scene. And within the first breath, I went, there she is. We got her. We got our girl. And that started the whole journey. Right? Is that
how you remember it too?
That's how I remembered exactly. No. No, I remember reading this play, I Capture the Castle, and thinking like, oh my God, this is like, it's just such an incredible play and such a wonderful part for any actress. Like, I mean, I was like, if I don't do this, I can't even understand how I'll survive. And so grateful when I got a call from Cameron, and he was like, yeah, will you do this? And I was like, great. And I had no idea that I would end up, within having the greatest relationship of my theatrical life.
And you guys have worked at Antaeus as well as at many other theaters. So how is it that you keep coming together and in very many different genres?
Or you go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I make you hire me.
That is a correction on that one. I beg you to come with me. It's a mutual thing, but I tell this, I teach acting and I love it, and I love having that part of my life. And I tell this often because I think it is a rare thing. But immediately doing that production, we just had this shorthand. We spoke the same language. I knew that she had amazing chops. She could listen. I'd say, what if we do this? Yep. Okay, I'm gonna try that. And what I don't know, I hope I'm not embarrassing you, but she's a yes actress. She's an actress who'll go, okay, all right, I'll try that. And I love that. I love it. Not that because I'm not right all the time. I have a lot of bad ideas, but she'll go, all right, I'll try that. I'll try that. So after that first experience, it was so wonderful and collaborative and positive, and the result was so stunning. I was like, well, I want her by my side. It's like hiring people that you want to be with. Who do you want to be in the room with? And I just said, I want her in the room. And that's because of that. That's 11 times down the road of these last 15 years or so. If anything is remotely right, I'll go, I've got the girl, she's coming with me. And a fun end to the story is several years after we had done that production of I Capture the Castle out here, a friend of mine is the artistic director at the Shakespeare Theater of New Jersey. And I'd known her a long, long time. And I'd been back there as an actor and had worked. But my directing career had started to take off, much to the thanks to I Capture the Castle. And Bonnie, a few years later, said, what is this I Capture the Castle thing that you guys did that was so successful out there? And I sent it to her, and it was right up Bonnie's alley. And she was like, I think I want to do this in my theater. And it's a beautiful equity theater on the campus of Drew University in Madison, New Jersey. Beautiful big theater. And she said, I'm going to put it in my season. Would you come? And I went, of course. I think that's brilliant. Can I bring somebody with me? And she said, who? And I said, I've got the lead. I've got her, and I can't do it without her. And she said, okay, you can bring her. And we cast the rest of the play in New York City. But I insisted that Rebecca come, and I will give you props for this. That's in my bio. Silly thing in my bio, it said the Wall Street Journal said it was the best in the country. It was because of that production. And Rebecca Mozo's picture was the entire top half of the page of the Wall Street Journal, and it was declared the best in the country. So I give that to her.
As well, it should. And we were very grateful to have you guys open our space here with Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and Rebecca playing Maggie the Cat, which was another stellar performance from you, directed by Cameron.
Yeah, that was like a dream.
Yeah. No, please, more.
No, but it was a real pinch me moment, to come from I Capture the Castle. And I just remember like looking at Cameron and being like, can you believe this? Like, we're doing Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. That's like a dream that we had for years, talking about doing that show. It was just wild.
Think about because Cameron's been very good about having teams, because this show also had Terry Lewis as the costume designer, who did an amazing job, and you've worked with her, and because of you, we have worked with her many times.
Yeah.
So when you find good people, I guess it's a good idea to hold on to them.
It's just it's so important. It's a hard. It's just hard. We all know this. Everybody who's in a part of this tonight, it's putting on anything is hard. Putting on a play is hard. Nobody's got enough money. Nobody's got enough time. Everybody's stretched so thin. And to have people who will just jump in and be so forward thinking and forward creatively moving. And when you find somebody like that, you just go, stay with me, stay with me, stay with me. And I'm blessed in that way with these actors and with designers that have stayed with me a long, long time.
I hear you. My first play at Antaeus was with Parapalas, with Rebecca Mozo playing my sister.
Oh my God.
So I hold her close too. I want to kind of bring this a little bit full circle and back to Caryl Churchill, Cameron, which is that she has continued to write. We did Cloud 9 at Antaeus a few years ago, but you had the opportunity to direct Love and Information, which is one of her newer plays. Yeah. And again, innovative in its structure. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about that, and so people can see where she's gone from this early play to this later play?
Yeah, and if you haven't read this play, you guys, read this play. It's completely different for her. It's this. I mean, it's her, but it's just a completely different structure. Again, she's playing with structure and how she executes things. But I knew of it. I'd heard about it, and I'd read reviews of it when it first came out. I was fascinated by it because it's 57. I think it's 57 short, little tiny scenes that are not related. And it's an evening of that. You go sit down and you literally watch A scene could be a page and a half of two people just saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Eve Gordon, Deborah Rolfhart, some of these people who are with us tonight did this production with me recently. But there are these small, tiny scenes. Some of them are not even a whole page. They're just a couple of lines, and some of them are silent. And in the theater, it's, I think, you would probably cast, or it was designed to where you would cast 6 actors or 8 actors, how many actors you could afford, and every actor would play 15 different parts, because I think literally between the 57 scenes, there are 100 and something, 150 parts or something. So you would, people would go off, they do a scene, they'd go off, they'd change or whatever. You would have a rotating cast like that. So when the pandemic hit early on, I'm friends with the artistic director of the Shakespeare, theater workshop of Nantucket on Nantucket. And he had reached out and said, I want to do something for my patrons, and I don't know what it is. We were all figuring out Zoom. And he said, I don't know how to do like a cat on a hot tin roof or anything like that, but I think I've got my hands on something that could be interesting, and I've got the rights to it. And it's Caryl Churchill's Love and Information. And I went, I did Top Girls. I'd love to be a part of that. And his concept was to ask 10 different directors across the country. We were all in lockdown, and assign or have the directors pick 5 or 6 or 10 or 12 of the 57 scenes. You had no limitations other than you had to do it on Zoom or on an iPhone. You could not be in the same space, and at that time we could not be in the same space. This was the height of the shutdown, and he gave us a couple of months to put it together. So I ended up with 13 of the pieces. And again, I reached out to the people that I loved, the Eve Gordons of the world, the Deborah Rolfharts, and Kimberly Kehoe, all of these students who were with me, actors like Rebecca and Matt did it. And I said, come do this for me. You may have to shoot it in your kitchen with an iPhone, or we're going to record it on Zoom, but we're going to do this scene. It's only a page and a half. Do it. And everybody.
And the scenes don't say like husband, wife, or dentist, patient, or there's no names, or it doesn't even say he, she. It's just line.
Yeah, it's literally line. What are you doing here? What do you mean? What are you doing here? Don't talk to me that way. And it doesn't tell you where you are, what it's about. And some of them, Eve, who's here with us, even Rhonda did one called Stones, and it's about 2 people seeing somebody in their vision. There you are, Eve. And they end up throwing stones at this person. It could be about anything you want it to be. And when we did these pieces, we made our own little reality for each one of these tiny little pieces, and we strung them together. I did my 13. I sent them into the Nantucket. He hired editors and sound mixers and all kinds of technical people. And it was directors like me, it was college directors, it was community theater people, there was a high school that got involved. So they strung this whole thing together, and it ended up being a presentation that you could watch for a couple of weeks. And it played for about an hour and 40 minutes. And because of the lockdown and being in the space that we were able to have, I think it ended up being 212 actors were involved in this. And it was fascinating. And unfortunately, because of rights, it's not available anymore because we can only show it for a couple of weeks. But the beauty of it is, Caryl had endorsed this. Miss Churchill had endorsed this for the theater to do it, because the pandemic was new to her too, and she didn't know anything. She said, well, this is a great idea. It fits the play. And she didn't have anything to do with our rehearsing or anything. And we were kind of waiting because Justin kept saying, she's going to watch it. She's promised me she'll watch it. And then towards the end of the run of the couple of weeks, she watched it, and she reached out to Justin and she said, I've watched it multiple times, and it is a triumph, because it is a way that I envisioned the play, but I knew would never happen because nobody could afford to do it that way. So we got to show her something that she never thought she would see.
Wow.
Pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it
Right,
just
Eve,
shows
look at
how
there's Eve.
her writing, she is not precious. She seems to allow things to be changed. You can order those scenes in any way you want. She's a fascinating, fascinating writer. I know people are going to have questions. So if you want to throw those in the chat, or maybe Alice will understand how that works, I'm just going
There's Deborah.
to vamp until we hear some. But Alice, do we have anybody written in the chat? Anything? Questions? Go ahead.
We don't, no questions in the chat so far. But I did want to remind you, Cameron, that you had a couple of clips. I don't know if you wanted to show.
Do y'all want? Yeah, we pulled out. Let's do it because
Yeah.
what the heck? It's Sunday night. And the pandemic's almost over.
And give people a chance to think of questions they might want to ask.
Yeah, we pulled out. This was kind of fun, you guys. We pulled out the archival video, which nobody has seen since we did the play, and I just pulled a little clip from that opening scene just to give you just a couple of minutes, just to give you an example of what that opening scene was if you didn't see the show. And also remember, this is just an archival footage of it. It's not you know, it is what it is. So, but you'll see.
Doesn't want to. Shame, and I walked on barefoot. My father came out in tears. Everyone was crying except me.
At least your father wasn't dead.
Well, it can
I
be a
had
relief
nobody.
to come home. I love to see Henny's sweet face again. Oh yes, I was perfectly content, and quite soon he sent for me again.
I don't think I would have gone.
But he told me to come. I had to obey him. He wanted me to help prepare his wedding. He was getting married to a young girl from France, and nobody
It's
except
always
me
hard
knew how to arrange
taking him
things
to
when you
another
like
woman.
them.
To live a woman's life. I don't understand.
The girl was 16 and far more beautiful than me. I could see why you loved her.
I can't
She
bear
had a
this.
younger brother with her and
Six brandies, double
they
brandies.
all went into the
Straight
room
away.
I prepared, and he stayed behind and put his arms around me and kissed me. I felt
let
like
us dream.
And he said, "This is your daughter and your son."
yes.
What?
Oh, I see. You got them back.
I did think it was remarkably barbaric to kill them, but you learn not to say anything.
Walter was a
Secretly
What
exposed.
is angry? What did you do?
Well, I fainted. Then I cried and kissed the children.
But did you
everyone was
feel
making a
anything
fuss
for
of
them?
me. What?
Did you feel anything for the children?
Of course. I loved them.
So you forgave him and lived with him?
He suffered so much all those years.
Henny had the same sweet nature. And they dressed you again?
Cloth of gold.
I can't forgive anything.
You really are exceptional, Griselda.
Nobody
Fabulous to see it again.
Yeah, it's so cool to see that again.
Yeah, you can tell that the weird kind of, it's funny, the dialogue overlaps, and it's difficult to do, but it sounds like real people talking when you end up with that. That's how life is.
And
Yeah.
it sounds like a dinner party, and it's kind of okay that you miss some of it, and we had to get comfortable with that too, of going, what did she say? And I think that's purposeful. I think Caryl does that on purpose, so you go, what did she say? Am I going to get that again? I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of people had to struggle that came from big families, like where like they just really wanted their voice to be like heard, and then we had to like learn that like you can, you got to be the baseline sometimes, bring the high notes in.
Absolutely.
Do we want to show that other clip just for fun, the scene change one? This is, let me show you before you start it. This is the thing that you the thing that doesn't show up too well on this archival tape, which is wonderful, but because of the lighting, you don't really get to see all of the activity that's happening with the women bustling around and moving these rolling tables and these chairs and pushing these walls. But this is just a little sample of that scene change, and you can see right there in that still, you can see the where they're standing in that kitchen, and look at the front row there. You can see people's feet and their heads. Look, that's like I gave them 4.5 feet to play that scene.
She's a nice kid, isn't she?
That's the
She's a
office.
bit thick. She's a bit funny.
She thinks you're wonderful.
She's not going to make it. It's just a few little things.
Voila.
No memory for birthdays, have I? And Christmases seem to slip by, so I think I owe Angie a few presents.
Wow. Well,
Oh, that's awesome. Rebecca, were you involved in that change? You're probably having a glamorous costume change at the time.
Yes, I was getting all of the hair clips out of my hair and getting the blouse on and the pants on, saying a
So-
prayer.
And that music, that was my first collaboration with Ellen Mandel, who came to me because I wanted original music. I didn't want to. The pre-show music was all fun 80s, getting the audience in the 80s mode, but I didn't want 80s music throughout the piece because it didn't feel right. And I wanted an original score, and we couldn't really afford to get have a composer that could. We found this wonderful woman in New York City, and she took it on, and she said, "I've got things that I want to do this. I want to score this." And she did this incredible score for this play, and she went on to do Picnic for me at NTS and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and she's done the Zip Code plays for you guys.
She has, yeah, we love Ellen. She has written the theme for the Zip Code plays, which is so beautiful. And she's brilliant because for each Zip Code play, people probably don't even notice this kind of thing, but you notice it somewhere, is for each different one, she's orchestrated it slightly different, adding different instrumentation or a jazzy theme or whatever's required for the piece. She makes slight changes. She's amazing. Thank you so much, Cameron Watson and Rebecca Mozo, for joining me in that conversation about Top Girls by Caryl Churchill. We have numerous other book clubs that I think you'll be interested to check out. So please give them all a view. I'm Bill Brochtrup. Thank you so much.